Good morning. I am delighted to be here this morning. Honored to be given the opportunity to try this thing out ahead of time. So I welcome you this morning. I'm doing two different services this morning, two related to one another. So if you're interested in the other piece, come back at 10:30. So Centers for Spiritual Living is an organization that is working to make the world a better place. It's working through all of its teachings and its service in the world to make this world a world that works for everyone. And so as an organization, they put out some suggested topics for our talks each week. And we're free to either accept or not these topics. So about 100 churches, maybe more now, have joined together deciding to support this world effort by speaking the same topics, each in our own unique ways, every Sunday with you. So today, I was given this topic, creating our tomorrows today, and I thought, well, yes, that's what we do. We always create our tomorrows today. That's just what's up for us. So I'm going to talk at this service about how we can use one arm of spirit to create our tomorrows today, and at the next talk, we're going to talk about the other arm. Because Science of Mind talks about God sort of as this two-pronged energy, one of those being law, as Will brought up, and the other being love, as he spoke very eloquently about. And so I want to start by saying a little bit about our founder, Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes spent a lifetime studying a wide range of philosophies and religious teachings. Early on in his life, he came out of Christian Science, and so he studied the teachings of the master teacher Jesus as his first teacher. Then he moved on into adulthood, and he began to study in depth the Greek philosophy of Plotinus, which was very, very influential in the Science of Mind philosophy. And then a little later, in his early to mid-20s, he began to study the teachings of Christian Larson. And one of Christian Larson's books turned him on a dime from Christian Science to the beginnings of the creation of Science of Mind. And so in addition to Christian Larson, the mental science teacher that was very influential for Ernest was Thomas Troward. And then he began to explore the philosophical essays of Ralph Waldo Emerson and found that these had a lot to say to his philosophy of life that was in creation at this point. Later on in his life, he discovered the high mystic Emma Curtis Hopkins and was her last teacher when she was 80 years old. He was her last student. And then finally, at the close of his life, just before his transition, he had begun to study Sri Aurobindo. And he studied this Eastern philosophy, teaching, spirituality, in order to confirm for himself that truth is truth, that East or West really doesn't matter, truth is truth. Because he knew that if he was going to create this philosophy that rang true for all beings, that it was going to have to be true in all traditions, in all cultures, through all time. That's the definition of truth. So thanks to his life's work, Science of Mind and Spirit, the philosophy that we teach and endeavor to practice, has come to us. So I give you a word of warning, though, as I begin this morning. Each of us, I know, has our own language for creative principle. We all use our own words, and we're free to do so here. It's a natural thing that each individual would have its own way of identifying and being in communion with God. One life, universal energy. And the God word makes some people uncomfortable, and I understand that. It's completely understandable. Ernest Holmes says that there's a universal wholeness seeking expression through everything. We're calling it simply life. The philosopher calls it reality. The metaphysician might call it spirit or divine mind. The quantum physicist might call it the field. The mystic, maybe the one. The Kabbalist, Ein Sof. A Jedi Knight, the Force. Okay. It's all the same thing. It doesn't matter what we call it. It matters that we call it. For simplicity's sake and my own preference today, I'm going to call it God, but you can feel free to translate however you'd like. So there are 10 guiding principles in Science of Mind and Spirit, and they help us to describe God, to identify with, to personify God in a way that works for us individually. And so, as I said, God, according to this philosophy, exists as love and law. It has a balance. Now, I'm not talking about emotional love. Science of Mind has a unique definition for love. It says that love is spirit's desire to express itself as all of creation. So the laws that we teach are universal laws. These are the truths that Ernest Holmes saw across traditions. And these laws maintain a balance and a harmony in the universe. So some of the examples of these laws are cause and effect. We've all heard that. It's everywhere. This is sort of an umbrella law that holds within it several other laws. For every action, there's a reaction. Under this umbrella of cause and effect, we have the law of attraction. Now, the law of attraction says that according to our thinking, our feeling, and our believing, this is where we get our experience. Then we have the law of expectancy. What we're looking for, we're bound to find. And the law of faith. What I have faith in manifests in my life. I'm going to talk more about that in the second service. So according to our philosophy, we have love, we have law. Good so far? All basic. How does this creating tomorrow today work in with this love and law thing? What does that have to do with anything? Well, it has everything to do with it. I'm going to zero in on this law aspect. So join me. I'd like you to join me for a brief journey if you're willing. If you feel comfortable, for just a couple of seconds to close your eyes, otherwise just listening and following. I'd like you to think about the very first job that you ever had. See yourself doing that very first job. Who did you work with? See it in your mind's eye. Okay, now let's jump forward a little bit in time and pull up into memory, into mind, the last job that you ever held. Not a current job if you're still working, but the one previous to what you might have right now. Can you see it? See who's there? See what you're doing? Okay. So those experiences are in your past, still alive in mind and living color. So now open your eyes. Where are all those people? Where'd they go? Weren't they just here? No, they're in the past. They're not here now. We never expected them to be here. But have you ever noticed that sometimes we act like the past is real? like it's really happening right now. We rehearse it in our minds. I'll just speak for myself because I know that I can do that sometimes. So here's what comes up for me when I think about why that might be happening, my reasons why that might be happening for me. I might regret past choices that I've made. I have made some really poor choices in my life. Thank goodness I haven't made any really big ones in a really long time. But I've made some big mistakes that have had some big consequences. And regret is a very human experience. And so regret holds us sometimes in the past. So sometimes I might be acting in the past from the past because I've had some really difficult life experiences. They've left me wounded, feeling hurt. And resentment comes with that feeling of woundedness. So resentment is also a very human emotion and completely normal and natural, as is anger and hurt and indignation. The problem with all of that is this law thing that we're talking about, this creative process that we're engaged in. Whether we realize it or not, it's always working. It's always working in our lives. And it's easy to see this law when we think of something like the law of gravity, right? Babies learn to walk, they get up, and when they trip, they all go downward. Nobody flies up in the air when they trip, right? So it's easy to see that. The laws of mind are a little bit trickier. They're not visible, not directly visible. They become visible through our experiences. So at first we might not even know that the thoughts and the feelings and the beliefs that we have are creative. At age 27, I had no clue that the mess I was in that moment was my own creation. That's how old I was when I walked through these doors. I would never have created that mess on purpose. Of course not. None of us ever do. I was pretty sure that I was a victim. It's their fault, right? Not me. How I wouldn't have done that. And then there were these magic words of my first teacher, actually in that room right there. Anybody have any idea what those words might have been, the magic words? I have good news and bad news. Which would you like to hear first? I was really brave and I said I'd like the bad news first. And he gave it to me. I had created everything in my life, not consciously, not on purpose, but I had created it all with my own thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and actions. Now this didn't and doesn't mean that I had reason to be critical of myself, to judge myself, to kick myself in the tail end over what I had done. It was just a point of awareness. It didn't make me responsible necessarily for my early childhood that had shaped me, for any of the experiences that I had had through my teen years and my early adulthood. It didn't mean that I was responsible for the actions of other people in my life now. That's not what it meant. What it meant was that if I had created the spot I was in, that I could recreate it and create a new future. That was the exciting part. No matter what, I could create my new future. So I got in the car and I headed home. And by the time I got halfway there, my mind was already churning. Doubt, all the voices from childhood saying, "What? Come on, what's he talking about? Could that be right?" Started rethinking the whole thing. Didn't I have the right to be angry? I thought I did. Yeah, I had the right. Of course I had the right. Weren't all those things that happened to me back then wrong? Well, they were anything but loving and kind. Some of them downright abusive. But the question that took some time in coming for me was how this anger was serving me now. How was this resentment serving me now? My righteous indignation, what was that getting me? Was it making my life any better? Looking at the condition of my life, I can say that it was not making my life any better. So I started on my path. That was the moment for me. My path of forgiveness, because forgiveness is always the first step. And it was forgiveness of myself that I had to begin with. So here are some questions that I had to ask. What if I accepted what I had done and what I had not done without any judgment at all? What if I just let go of it? How would that feel? What if I could look at all that had happened in my life as just things that happened? Putting down all the criticism and just letting it be. How would that feel? You know, the word forgive means to give forward, to move on, to give yourself permission and others permission to move on, to give forward. What if I stopped telling stories to myself and other people? I'm sure they appreciated that. What if I stopped telling those stories as if they were still happening and began to create new stories, stories that I wanted to see in my life? Make it up, because that's what we're doing anyway. We're just making it up. Wouldn't this empower me to create a whole new experience? Ernest Holmes reminds us to cut loose the threads of previous experiences and deliberately make up our minds that we shall no longer create our future out of the old past. You mean I can just make up my mind? This was news to me. Just like that? Well, I came to see that it can be simple. Spiritual truth is always really simple. Now, I said simple. I didn't say that it's always easy. I didn't say that it doesn't take some work, some attention. But we each have an innate capacity to direct our own minds. We are built that way as human beings. So I'd like to read to you a quote from The Science of Mind, Living the Science of Mind. It tells us that the master teacher Jesus did not seem to think that this change required months and years of strenuous effort. One of the outstanding things Jesus taught was that the mistakes of yesterday can be canceled, that God's creation is always taking place. No matter what the experiences of yesterday may have been, they can be changed. Unlike those around him, he knew that God, or the divine spirit, wishes only good for everyone. He knew that we are all rooted in pure spirit, in perfect life, and that in any moment we can so unify ourselves with the power of good that evil will disappear from our experience. Now, evil, for science of mind philosophy, is mistaken thinking, limiting thoughts, fears. We don't believe in a power of evil. Even as we did yesterday, set the law of life in motion to create what we are doing today, so what we are doing today sets the same law in motion to create what will happen to us tomorrow. Isn't that good news? I know it was in my life. What we did yesterday is carried over into today only because we give consent to it. What we are thinking and doing today can create the kind of tomorrow we wish to experience if we will change our outlook on life. But since today is the only day in which we live, and yesterday has forever passed, The change that we need to make within ourselves must be made today. And so we have to live each day as though it were complete and perfect within itself. We have to live each day as though all the joy there is in the universe were ours now. And we have to live each day as though all the joy we ever expect to experience is ours now. So creating our tomorrows today. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's how my understanding of God as law can benefit my life. So I begin by getting real with myself. This is what I did, and this is what I continue to do every single day. So this, for some who have been here for 20 years, 25, 30 years on this spiritual journey, this might sound like, well, yeah, we know this. This is the beginning stuff. But I tell you, for myself, this is the beginner's mind of every morning. This is every day's work. So these questions that I'm asking here, I've put a little green sheet in your program. So these questions are there for you, should you decide to take them home for homework. I always give homework. On the flip side was the reading also from this morning. So here are my questions that I continue to use. Am I willing to put down the past? Am I willing to accept that I can begin again? There's a common word here, this willingness thing. Am I willing to do the work involved in creating my tomorrows the way I'd like them to be? Am I willing to step out a little bit, or in a big way, to practice faith in these principles that are taught here? If I'm feeling hurt by experiences of the past, am I willing to believe that my tomorrows can be joyful? Am I willing to find gratitude for my soul's journey up to now? Am I willing to forgive those who, in their unskillful ways, have created pain and hurt in my life? And am I willing to admit that there is good in my life and to give time and attention to my blessings? I find that no matter how far I travel in this journey, these continue to be good questions for my contemplation. If this seems difficult to you, take it slow, take it small. Start with a minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes of meditation, of prayer, of contemplation. Giving thanks for what is good. Because when we appreciate something, it appreciates, right? It grows. Ernest Holmes spent a lifetime studying these philosophies and religious teachings. And so we're going to use them today. I'm going to end our talk this morning, this first talk, with a little bit of a guided meditation to lead us into our prayer. And so we begin the process of this by settling into our chairs and getting comfortable. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, feel free to do so. As you allow your breath to find its own pace and flow, remember that as Reverend Sue so eloquently told us 2 weeks ago, the heart has a mind of its own. Some call it the heart mind. It consists of 40,000 specialized sensory neurons that can think and learn and remember independent of the brain. And so settling into that heart space right now, fully arriving in the heart, slowing your breathing, gently touch one hand to your heart if you're comfortable doing so. Allowing your heart to be open, to be filled with the light of Spirit, to settle into the presence of the divine, to allow yourself to be enfolded in its warm glow, knowing that it is expressing itself intentionally and perfectly as each one of us. And knowing that each of us is living our lives within its fathomless being. We begin this process of blessing ourselves. Bless your body, that it be lifted to a new expression of mind. And bless your life, that it be an extension of your mind. Bless your future, that it never be your past. And bless your past, that it turns to wisdom. Bless the adversity in your life, that it initiates you into greatness, and that you see the hidden meaning behind all things. Bless your soul, that it wake you up from this dream of the past, and it keeps you awake. And bless the divine in you, that it moves in you, that it moves through you, and that it moves all around you, creating a new cause in your life. And finally, I want you to give thanks for your new life before it is made manifest, feeling the peace, the joy, the love, the freedom in its fullness, so that your body begins to experience that future now. Knowing that gratitude is the divine signature of that which already is. And now, anchoring this experience as together we close in prayer. Here and now, knowing and experiencing the one divine presence, and fully accepting its movement through my life now, in me, through me, and as me. It brings itself to serve. It brings itself to unfold, always for the good, in every moment. And so right here and right now, I invite the presence of God. I become aware of the presence of God in every moment, in every situation, every condition, every relationship, in every task and every experience. And I surrender to it in the deepest gratitude for its presence in my life, allowing it to express in more powerful, more beautiful, more joy-filled, more grace-filled ways than I have ever known before. I speak this prayer from a place of spiritual authority, fully accepting the power of my word as the word of God moving through me. For there is only one of us here. And so I release it now, knowing that the loving presence and infallible action of the one is complete. As together we say, and so it is. Thank you.